Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why two people with the same resources, the same education, even the same opportunities, can end up with completely different results in life? One rises, one stays stuck. The difference isn't luck. It isn't even talent, it's thinking. Not just thinking harder, but thinking correctly. Today, I want to talk to you about the one skill that has the power to change everything: how you see the world, how you make decisions, how you respond to challenge, how you define success, and ultimately how far you go. Because when you learn how to think correctly, with clarity, with purpose, with responsibility, you don't just change your thoughts. You change your life. Thinking correctly doesn't begin with what you're doing or even how you're doing it. It begins with why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why does it matter? Why does it exist? This is the foundation of all effective, correct thinking. Without a clear sense of purpose, thoughts become reactive, scattered, and ultimately powerless. But when thinking is driven by purpose, it becomes focused, strategic, and resilient. Most people spend their lives chasing goals, checking boxes, and reacting to circumstances, rarely stopping to ask, is this the right path? Is this what I truly want? Is this aligned with something meaningful to me? They ask, what should I do? Instead of, why does this matter to me? The result: a life filled with busy motion but very little true progress. They climb ladders only to find the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. Correct thinking reverses this. It starts with introspection. It asks the deep, uncomfortable questions that many avoid. It forces you to slow down before speeding up. When you understand your why, your purpose, your core reason, you gain a lens through which to evaluate every thought, decision, and action. This isn't just motivational talk. It's cognitive strategy, because the human brain craves direction. Without a compass, it loops, it overthinks, it reacts. But with purpose, it filters, it decides, it acts with clarity. Think about some of the greatest leaders, creators, and thinkers in history. They didn't begin with a plan. They began with a belief. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't start with what needs to change. He started with a dream, a why that anchored everything. Steve Jobs didn't begin with how do we sell computers. He started with a belief in challenging the status quo and making beautifully designed tools that empower individuals. These were not accidental thoughts. They were deliberate frameworks of purpose that shaped every decision that followed. Starting with why doesn't mean you have all the answers right away. It means you're anchored. It means your thoughts have a North Star. Every challenge becomes a question of alignment. Does this fit my purpose? Is this thought, this belief, this action helping me move toward what I truly value? This kind of clarity strips away distraction. It makes complexity manageable, and more importantly, it gives you the courage to say no to what doesn't matter. In a world full of noise, information, and options, it's easy to confuse motion with meaning. We read more, consume more, compare more, and still feel lost. That's because correct thinking doesn't come from more information. It comes from better intention. When you don't know your why, the world will try to give you one. Society, social media, even people with good intentions will project their values onto you. And if you're not clear, you'll adopt them and wonder why you feel off course, uninspired, or anxious. Purpose protects you from that. It becomes your mental filter. It helps you separate what's urgent from what's important, what's popular from what's true to you. There's also a powerful emotional dimension to starting with why. When your thoughts are aligned with a purpose bigger than comfort, ego, or approval, you build resilience. Struggle becomes meaningful, failure becomes data. Challenges become stepping stones instead of roadblocks. Without a why, even minor obstacles feel overwhelming. With a why, even mountains feel climbable. Because now, you're not just thinking, you're thinking with intention. This alignment also fuels consistency. People often struggle with motivation, not because they're lazy, but because they're disconnected from purpose. When you're clear on your why, discipline becomes easier. Decisions become faster. You don't need to hype yourself up every day because your actions are now tethered to something real. You're not just chasing success, you're expressing who you are through what you do. Correct thinking, then, isn't just a matter of logic. It's a matter of direction. You can have the sharpest mind in the room, but if it's not aligned with purpose, it will work against you. You'll overanalyze, self-sabotage, or waste your energy solving the wrong problems. But when your thoughts stem from a deeply held why, you unlock clarity, conviction, and power. You move from confusion to confidence, from drifting to driving. You begin to lead your mind instead of following it. Most of what we believe, we never chose consciously. From a young age, we inherit ideas from parents, teachers, media, culture, and society. We accept them as truth because they're repeated often or because they come from people we trust. Over time, those ideas become our assumptions, invisible lenses that shape how we think, decide, and interpret the world. The danger is these assumptions often go unquestioned. And when assumptions go unquestioned, they quietly guide our thinking down paths that may be completely misaligned with truth, purpose, or reality. Thinking correctly requires a kind of mental rebellion. It means not taking your thoughts at face value just because they feel familiar. It means interrupting automatic beliefs and asking, is this actually true? Where did I learn this? Does this idea serve me or limit me? When you develop the habit of questioning, you begin to separate inherited ideas from intentional ones. You move from passive thinking to active thinking. This doesn't mean doubting everything for the sake of being difficult. It means being rigorous with your own mind. Every thought you have leads somewhere. It builds on a foundation. If that foundation is based on faulty assumptions, then even your smartest reasoning will lead to wrong conclusions. Correct thinking doesn't begin with answers, it begins with better questions. Assumptions are sneaky. They live in phrases like "I'm just not good at that," or "that's the way it's always been," or "people like me don't succeed in that field." They live in stories we tell ourselves without realizing those stories were written by someone else. And when we accept these without challenge, we unconsciously limit what's possible. We see boundaries where there are none. We obey rules that were never real. To think correctly is to question the source and structure of your beliefs. Where did this rule come from? Who benefits if I believe this? What would happen if the opposite were true? These kinds of questions crack open the mind. They expose outdated thinking and open doors to new insight. They don't always lead to immediate answers, but they lead to clarity. And clarity is the fuel of good thinking. There's also an emotional component to questioning assumptions. It can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like betrayal, especially if the assumptions come from people we love or admire. But maturity in thinking means learning to hold two things at once: respect for where your beliefs came from, and the courage to change them if they no longer serve you. This is not rebellion against your past. It's responsibility for your future. This process applies not just to personal beliefs, but to how we approach problems. Often, people get stuck not because the problem is unsolvable, but because they're solving the wrong problem. They've accepted the wrong premise. For example, someone might ask, "How do I get people to like me more?" when the real question should be, "Why do I need constant approval?" One question keeps you trapped, the other sets you free. Correct thinking is rarely about having the right information alone. It's about framing the right question, and to do that, you have to challenge the assumptions baked into how you define problems, goals, and even success. This mindset shift transforms you from a passive consumer of thoughts to an active architect of your own mind. When you start to question everything, not with cynicism but with curiosity, you begin to realize how much of your thinking has been inherited rather than chosen. You begin to feel a shift from fog to clarity, from frustration to empowerment. You're no longer simply reacting to life. You're investigating it, shaping it, leading it from the inside out. think long term, trade urgency for clarity. We live in a culture obsessed with immediacy, quick wins, fast results, instant gratification. Everything is about now. How fast can I get it? How soon can I finish it? How immediately will I see results? While urgency can sometimes drive action, it often clouds judgment. It makes us reactive instead of thoughtful, impatient instead of strategic. When urgency drives thinking, we begin to make decisions based on pressure, not principles. We seek relief instead of results. We chase what feels good now rather than what is good long term. Correct thinking requires a shift in time perspective. It's about thinking beyond the moment. It's about trading the illusion of speed for the power of direction. Long-term thinking doesn't mean being slow or passive. It means anchoring your decisions to a broader vision. It's understanding that what feels right in the moment isn't always what leads to real growth, impact, or success. When you think long-term, you see through short-term noise. You ask, will this matter in 5 years? Rather than how can I fix this in 5 minutes? Long-term thinking also gives you the patience to build things that last. Whether it's a business, a relationship, a skill, or a reputation, anything meaningful takes time. But if your thinking is built around shortcuts, hacks, or speed, you'll abandon the process the moment it gets hard. You'll chase the next trend instead of sticking to the path that aligns with your purpose. Discipline and consistency are impossible without a long-term mindset. Because the moment things don't work quickly, your mind will convince you it's not working at all. The quality of your thoughts improves when they're no longer fueled by desperation. When you remove the pressure of needing immediate results, you create space for clarity. You can reflect instead of react. You can prioritize what's important over what's urgent. This clarity allows for better problem solving. Instead of trying to solve symptoms, you address root causes. Instead of making decisions based on emotion, you make them based on vision. There's also a deeper level of peace that comes from thinking long term. It allows you to accept temporary discomfort because you trust the process. You're not shaken by every failure, delay, or doubt because your focus is not on the next hour. It's on the next decade. This mental shift gives you strength. It makes your thinking more stable. You're less likely to panic, compare, or give up because you've detached your thinking from short-term validation. Long-term thinking also changes the way you handle relationships. You stop using people for quick benefits. You invest in trust, reputation, and connection. You realize that how you make people feel today can shape the opportunities and collaborations of tomorrow. It teaches you that consistency in character often matters more than brilliance in the moment. Most importantly, long-term thinking protects your energy. It allows you to say no to distractions, hype, and pressure. It teaches you to measure success not in speed, but in alignment. When you think beyond the now, you stop living in reaction to the world and start building a life that lasts. Embrace responsibility. Victim thinking blocks growth. One of the greatest shifts in thinking happens when a person moves from blame to ownership. It is the moment when they stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What can I do about it?" This shift is not about denying pain or injustice. It's about reclaiming power. Victim thinking is seductive because it offers relief. It gives you something or someone else to blame. It allows you to feel justified in your inaction, your anger, your frustration. But while it may feel good in the moment, it slowly erodes your sense of agency, your clarity of thought, and your ability to grow. Correct thinking is impossible when responsibility is absent. When you operate from a mindset that everything is someone else's fault, your upbringing, your boss, the economy, society, you shut down the part of your mind that looks for solutions. You begin to see problems as permanent and personal. You start believing that your circumstances define your future. But responsibility is the mindset that says, even if it's not my fault, it is still my life. It doesn't mean you caused every problem. It means you own your response. Responsibility doesn't always feel fair, and that's exactly why it's powerful. Because the moment you take responsibility for your thoughts, emotions, and actions, you no longer need life to be fair in order to move forward. You stop waiting for perfect conditions or for others to change, and you begin the process of change within yourself. That shift is what separates those who stay stuck from those who grow. It's not intelligence or luck or resources. It's responsibility. This mindset also changes the way you see challenges. Instead of thinking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "What is this teaching me?" You begin to view obstacles as feedback. You start treating mistakes as data. Responsibility reframes difficulty as opportunity. And with that frame, your thoughts become more constructive, more curious, and more forward-focused. You no longer think in circles of blame, you think in systems of growth. Responsibility also sharpens your self-awareness. You stop defending your ego and start examining your patterns. You notice how your thinking, your habits, your reactions contribute to your current reality. That awareness is uncomfortable at first, but it's also freeing, because now you're in the driver's seat. You're no longer hoping life gets easier. You're getting stronger. Your thinking becomes less about what others should do and more about what you can do. That's where real influence begins. It's easy to fall into the trap of waiting for the right time, the right motivation, the right person to validate you. But when you take responsibility, you stop waiting and start creating. You realize you're not owed success, clarity, or peace. These are things you build, and the blueprint starts with how you think. A responsible thinker asks, "What's in my control right now?" and focuses their energy there. They don't waste time obsessing over what others think, what others have, or what others should do. They use that time to take small, consistent action toward their own values and goals. This mindset also creates emotional resilience. Because when you take ownership of your thoughts and choices, setbacks don't destroy you, they inform you. You stop internalizing failure as identity and start using it as insight. You don't crumble under pressure because your foundation isn't built on being right or being perfect. It's built on being responsible. And responsibility is stable. It holds up even when circumstances collapse. Responsibility also rewires your relationships. You stop blaming others for your emotional state. You start communicating with clarity, listening with intention, and showing up with integrity. You realize that your peace doesn't depend on other people behaving a certain way. It depends on how you choose to think and act regardless of how others behave. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or disrespect. It means refusing to let your mind be controlled by the actions of others. It means choosing your response with purpose rather than emotion. Filter input. Your thoughts are only as clean as your influences. The human mind is not a closed system. It is constantly absorbing, reacting, and adapting to what it takes in. Every voice you listen to, every conversation you have, every piece of content you consume, it all becomes part of your internal environment. Most people don't realize just how much of their thinking is shaped by what they expose themselves to. They believe their thoughts are entirely their own, but in truth, many of those thoughts were planted by external sources. And if those sources are negative, scattered, shallow, or toxic, it's only a matter of time before your thinking starts to reflect the same. Correct thinking requires clean input. Just like a filter purifies water, you need a mental filter to purify what enters your mind. If you allow in everything, every opinion, every headline, every piece of gossip, every complaint, you'll drown in noise. Your thinking will become cloudy. Your ability to focus, to discern, and to decide will slowly erode. You may not even notice it happening. That's the danger. The mind rarely alerts you when it's being corrupted. It just starts producing weaker thoughts, more reactive responses, and more mental fatigue. Filtering your input begins with awareness. Who are you listening to? What are you watching? What kind of conversations are you participating in? Every time you engage with someone or something, it either feeds your clarity or feeds your confusion. Swipe, always reaching. It means being intentional. It means recognizing that not every voice deserves a place in your mind. Not every idea should be accepted without examination. Not every trend is worth following. The quality of your thinking is directly connected to the quality of your influences. If you surround yourself with people who complain, your thinking will bend toward pessimism. If you constantly consume fear-based media, your thoughts will default to anxiety. If you fill your day with shallow entertainment, your thinking will lose depth. But if you feed your mind with wisdom, insight, challenge, and truth, your thinking will sharpen. You'll begin to generate ideas that are original, solutions that are meaningful, and decisions that are grounded. One of the most overlooked forms of input is self-talk. The way you speak to yourself becomes one of your most powerful influences. If your inner voice is always criticizing, doubting, or diminishing you, then no amount of external positivity will fully stick. You have to learn to become your own ally in thought. This doesn't mean lying to yourself or inflating your ego. It means choosing language that builds rather than breaks. Thoughts like "I can figure this out," "I'm learning," or "this is difficult, but not impossible," can change the way your mind processes challenge. Another critical source of input is your environment. The physical space you occupy affects your mental clarity more than most people realize. Cluttered spaces often reflect or even contribute to cluttered thinking. Chaotic environments can keep your mind in a state of low-level stress. Even the way your digital world is set up, notifications, endless tabs, constant scrolling, can overwhelm your mental system with input you didn't consciously choose. When you filter your environment, you're not just making things look better, you're creating space for better thoughts to form. People often try to change their thinking without first changing their inputs. They try to stay positive while listening to negative voices. They try to focus while swimming in distraction. They try to be original while constantly consuming recycled opinions. But thinking doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is formed, shaped, and reinforced by what surrounds it. If you want better thoughts, you must begin by choosing better sources. This means being selective about what you read, who you follow, what you allow into your schedule, and where you place your attention. Filtering input is not about being rigid or closed-minded. It's about being a good steward of your mind. Just as you wouldn't let anyone walk into your home and start rearranging furniture, you shouldn't let just anyone influence how you think. Your mind is your most valuable space. It's where your dreams are born, where your problems are solved, where your future is designed. The input you allow into that space will either help you build or quietly destroy. Learning to filter doesn't make you weak or unkind. It makes you intentional, and intention is at the heart of correct thinking. Act your way into clarity, waiting to feel ready. You are not clarity before T here, a King. That you need to feel confident, certain, or inspired before you begin. It's a belief that disguises itself as logic, but functions like a trap. It convinces you to delay, to plan endlessly, to overanalyze, and to wait. And while you're waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, or the perfect feeling, time passes, opportunities vanish, and your momentum dies. The truth is, most clarity doesn't come before action, it comes through it. Thinking correctly doesn't mean having all the answers in advance. It means learning to move forward even when the picture is incomplete. It means understanding that action is not the opposite of thought, it's a continuation of it. Many people assume that clarity is a prerequisite for movement, but in reality, movement is often the prerequisite for clarity. When you act, you gain feedback. You test ideas against reality. You discover what works, what doesn't, and what needs to change. That process refines your thinking in a way that theory alone never can. Correct thinking is not passive. It is not endless reflection with no direction. It's a balance of thought and execution. People often get stuck in what's called analysis paralysis. The more they think, the more confused they get, and the more confused they get, the more they think. It becomes a mental loop with no escape. The way out is not always another layer of thought. Sometimes the fastest way forward is to simply do the next small step. Not because you're sure, but because staying still guarantees nothing changes. There's a myth that successful people always knew exactly what they were doing. In truth, many of them started with doubt. They began before they felt ready. They moved while still figuring things out. What separated them wasn't perfect thinking but decisive action. They were willing to look foolish, to fail early, to adjust constantly. Their thinking improved because their actions gave them more data, more insight, more real-world understanding than contemplation ever could. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you take action. Your mind begins to believe in possibility. Action builds momentum, and momentum gives birth to belief. When you do something, even something small, you signal to your brain that progress is happening. That signal overrides fear, quiets doubt, and focuses your thinking on what's next instead of what's missing. The act of doing generates energy, and energy strengthens mental clarity. Waiting to feel ready is often a form of fear in disguise. It's fear dressed up as logic. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of not being good enough. All these fears convince you that if you just think a little more, plan a little better, or wait a little longer, fear will go away, but it rarely does. Fear doesn't vanish with more thinking. It shrinks with movement. Each step forward rewrites your belief about what's possible, not because you thought your way into belief, but because you acted your way into evidence. Correct thinking isn't afraid of imperfection. It allows room for errors, missteps, and uncertainty because it sees those not as threats, but as essential ingredients of growth. When you take action, you expose your thinking to real-world tension. That tension challenges assumptions, strengthens insight, and sharpens your direction. It helps you see what no amount of internal speculation ever could. Action brings your thoughts into contact with reality, and that contact is where transformation begins. You don't need to know the whole path. You just need to take the next clear step. Often, the fog only begins to lift once you move. Thought and action are partners, not competitors. Each one feeds the other. Action without thinking is reckless. But thinking without action is powerless. The strongest clarity comes when you stop asking if you're ready and start asking what's possible if you begin.